Hello class, and welcome to my Eccentric Academy. Today we're talking about the Doctor Who episode, The Pandorica Opens. But before we do that, I should introduce myself. My name is Cademan David, or as the Cyber Controller calls me, Mr. Cow.
Cademan, you have a package.
Oh, do I?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go see what it is. Oh, hey, look. Let's see what's inside. It's empty. That's weird. It's almost like this is designed to be a prison.
Huh, that's really weird. Well, he's locked up forever.
Hey, let me out! I don't know why he locked me in this box, but at least I brought my notes with me. So in spite of the betrayal that just happened, I'm gonna go ahead and review the episode at hand. So what is there to say about the Pandorica Opens episode? Actually, there's a lot. Like, this episode is obviously the first part of an epic two-part finale. And I think this episode is the most epic a finale has ever felt. Like, they just really do a good job of bringing in a lot of familiar monsters. Now, of course, the familiar monsters don't do that much in this episode. But this just feels really big. And the way it starts with cameos from characters from previous episodes throughout the season is just quite wonderful. Seeing how good this finale was, because I think Matt Smith's later finales really went downhill. And of course, the finale to Disney Plus's Doctor Who was, if there's a nice way of saying hot garbage, that's what it was. But this episode just really captures the scope of what Doctor Who can be in a really big way. It makes it feel like all of these monsters are part of the same universe, which I always love, and it just sort of really feels like we're getting some, world building in the Doctor Who world, which I always love. Doctor Who should have a coherent world with coherent timelines. Unfortunately, showrunners seem to think less and less that that's the case. But anyway, this episode is very enjoyable. It's a pretty good first part to the two-part finale. Now, we'll see what I think of the second part, but this episode in of itself, it's pretty good. Is it one of my favorite episodes? By no means. But is it a good episode? Yeah, I'd say so. It's an episode that captures the epicness you kind of want from a season finale. So, for that, good job. At least my brother was nice enough to lock water in this box with me. You get very thirsty talking during these videos. With that being said, let's move on to I'm going to give a brief episode synopsis. From now on, we call it synopsis. This episode starts out, we have Van Gogh, he's freaking out, he painted a TARDIS blowing up. Winston Churchill somehow gets his hands on that TARDIS blowing up. He calls River Song. He says, I tried to call the doctor, but I'm calling you instead. Then River Song's like, oh, I need to, get that picture or something. So then he goes to the Queen of England from the episode where the Queen of England is on a spaceship, but she's actually on a space whale instead of a spaceship. It's a good episode. I'll link my review of that episode somewhere, maybe, probably. So River Song goes and buys like one of those wrist things that the time agents have. And she goes back, disguises herself as Cleopatra for some reason. Then the doctor shows up because River Song wrote something in a wall at the beginning of time or something when there was giant mushrooms. And then she's like, oh, look at this picture, look at what it says on the door of the TARDIS. And then they go to Stonehenge and they're like, there's a box, what is this box? Then some Cybermen are there. The doctor realizes that the box is telling basically everyone in the universe that it's opening. Everyone in the universe shows up and they're like, we're gonna put you in that box, doctor, and there's nothing you can do about it. River Song brings some Romans to defeat all of the guys that are showing up. One of them ends up being Rory. Rory saves Amy from a Cyberman, and then all of the aliens lock the doctor in the box, and Rory turns out to be a nesting clone of Rory, and he kills Amy, which was cool. So, yeah, and then River Song goes to Amy's house. She finds a picture of Rory, a picture of the Romans, and the book called Pandora's Box. And she's like, this seems a little bit too much like the events at hand. And then the doctor's like, wow, you guys are all working together? Why is that? And then they're like, we're saving the universe from you, Doctor. And that is where this episode ends. So, with that being said, that's the sort of synopsis. Highly recommend you go and watch the episode for yourself, because my little synopsis won't do it justice. But it's fairly epic, so I would go and watch it. With that being said, let's move right on to my likes and dislikes for this episode. So we're going to start by talking about the things that I actually didn't like in this episode, and then we'll move on to the things that I did like. So the first thing I didn't really care for is River Song. River Song in the Matt Smith era of the show, I just don't really care for the way she's written. I don't like her dynamic with the doctor. It makes me uncomfortable. And this episode is quite a bit better than her first episode with Matt Smith, I think, but there's still a little bit of this discomfort there. So yeah, I went ahead and gave a -point for that. Now, the next thing I didn't really care for is there's a line about a wise wizard and how wise wizards always end up being the doctor, and this sort of just goes back to one of those things where Stephen Moffat tends to overplay the role of the doctor, and it just overemphasizes how important to the universe the doctor is, where in my headcanon I think that Time Lords are very important, but I don't think the Doctor, outside of the fact that he is the last Time Lord, is very important. And this is just one of those things where Stephen Moffat obviously didn't see it that way. Another thing that I have written down here is the cyber ships. Now, the reason this is the case is because in the Russell T era, the Cybermen are not alien Cybermen, but they're actually the alternate universe Cybermen. And here, we're just sort of left to assume that these Cybermen, because they have spaceships, are the Cybermen from original Classic Who, but that is never stated all throughout Stephen Moffat's era, and I sort of wish that they would tell us if these Cybermen were the ones from New Who or the ones from Classic Who, or some amalgamation of both of them, the Cybermen met each other and sort of formed one Cyberman society. which I've heard people make the claim that that's the case, but it's never said, so we never know. Now, the last thing that I have as a dislike is in this episode, River Song goes back to Amy's house and she finds all of this stuff that, looks like the stuff that the Doctor and Amy are interacting with. And it's kind of a reveal of this episode. However, the problem with this is that she finds a picture of Rory. However, unless there's something that explains why there's a picture of Rory that I missed, this doesn't make sense because obviously Rory at this point in time never existed. He was erased from time, so there's no way that she could have found a picture of him if he never existed. I don't know, maybe there's something I missed, something that explains this later, but I reckon there's probably not. So, unless, in the second part of this episode, I watched the second part and Rory, they find some way to explain why there was a picture of Rory, I'm gonna have to give that a negative point. I know it's kind of a nitpick, but my academy, my rules. I'm allowed to nitpick. Now, with that being said, boy, oh boy, this must have been a really good episode because I have so many good things about this episode to say. I have, just a lot of really good things that I enjoyed quite a bit. And that starts at the opener. The opener, we get cameos from historical figures that have showed up in previous episodes, like Vincent van Gogh and Winston Churchill, which I was very happy to see these characters pop back up. And then, of course, as part of that, we also have River Song, and then the Queen of England from the episode where the Queen of England has a space whale that it turns out she's not on a spaceship, she's on a space whale. So that opening, I just give +2 points for because I thought it's cool. It's sort of a grandiose opening to a grandiose finale. It sort of, just wraps together everything that kind of happened in this season. With that being said, because I love time agents, apart from the opener, I give also +1 point to the mention of a time agent that River Song got, like the time watch type thing that the time agents have right off the wrist of a time agent. Anyway, any reference to the time agent sort of lore or Captain Jack stuff, I'm always happy to hear about. Now, also I gave +1 point to the TARDIS exploding, this idea that the TARDIS is going to explode and the painting of it doing so. That all was really cool, hinting at it the way it was hinted at before this, and how the Doctor sort of knows more of what's going on. I liked all that. I thought that was really cool. Next up on my list of things I really liked, I have Stonehenge. I just think Stonehenge is really interesting, and I love when science fiction things sort of try and play with what may be the purpose of Stonehenge is. And in this, underneath of it, of course, is the super secret prison, but also there's Cybermen there. And that will actually bring me to my next thing I really like, is I really liked sort of the cyber parts just scattered around Stonehenge. I thought that seemed sort of cool. That looks sort of cool. And I just thought that was sort of cool. The head and the arm, just seeing them there, and this sort of almost Indiana Jones type adventure the Doctor went on, and there's these pieces of Cybermen that come back to life and try and attack him. I thought was really cool. I also want to give 1 point for the reference of deadlocks. The pandorica was a deadlock, or had deadlocks, which we know deadlocks are the one of two things that the sonic screwdriver can't affect. The other, of course, being wood. Which, by the way, for this, because I heard that and I was like, oh, the deadlock thing, I sort of looked into it, and what I found was actually quite surprising. Apparently, the idea that the sonic screwdriver doesn't work on wood or deadlock seals, that was all a invention of New Who. Apparently, in classic Who, it never came up or wasn't a rule. So anyway, that's just an interesting tidbit that I didn't know. I've seen a few episodes of classic Who, but I haven't seen every episode by any means. Mostly I've seen Third Doctor episodes, but I hadn't realized that the deadlock or wood thing, that was never a thing prior to New Who. Next up, we have a reference to the Sycorax. I love the Sycorax. I think they're great. They need to show up again. Bring them back, please. Next up, there's a little thing that I have to point out, because I am a huge fan of Star Trek, as you know. In this episode, a Cyberman says, you will be assimilated.
You will be assimilated.
Of course, this is a reference to the Borg from Star Trek, which the Cybermen are, of course, very similar to the Borg. Especially, I think in New Who, they really made them like the Borg, where you have them, like, walking through this tunnel, and there's, like, a bunch of Cybermen hibernating, just waiting to wake up, is very reminiscent of the scenes of Picard and Riker, on the Borg cube, and there's just a bunch of Borg hibernating or like doing their thing, not paying attention to them. Anyway, with that being said, there's obviously some inspiration from the Borg in the way New Who sort of presents the Cybermen. So anyway, that's cool. I like the Borg. I like the Cybermen. They're both really cool, and it's fun that I think Stephen Moffat in this episode, I believe he wrote the script for this episode. I would assume he would. But anyway, whoever wrote this script sort of homaged the Borg with that line. Now, the next thing that I really liked was Rory's epic return. How he's like a cool sword-fighting Roman, and I think that just sort of points to that, like, a lot of times we're like, oh, this person is, like, kind of a silly character. And it's like, well, silly people can also be cool sword-fighting Romans as well. Just, they need to take the time to actually learn to be that, and then they're capable, right? There's this sort of misconception that some people just aren't capable of, like, being that sort of cool sword-fighting Roman character. But I think that is a major misconception, and even people that are sort of clumsy have the ability to learn that. So I sort of like that Roman Rory kind of points to that in a way. Also, of course, I talk about how sometimes Stephen Moffat's humor really hits for me, sometimes it really doesn't hit for me. Most of the time I find it doesn't hit for me, or most of the times I remember it doesn't hit for me. However, in this episode, this is an example of one of the times it does hit for me, and that is with Rory and the Doctor being like, oh, I think there's something that I'm missing, something I'm not seeing, it's right in front of my nose, and like Rory tries to say something to him, he's like, oh, be quiet, Rory. And then him being like, oh, I'm not trying to be rude, but like you ceased to exist not that long ago. So anyway, plus 1 point for Rory and, those two things. Next up, on a similar vein, the return of the nesting consciousness. I love it. Bring the nesting consciousness back. Another thing I like, similar vein, the Jadoon. I love the Jadoon. I love their design. I love the sort of idea of them. I want more Jadoon in my Doctor Who. Please give me more Jadoon. We should start a campaign to bring back the Jadoon, I think. And then the next thing on that vein is Santarans are another race I like.
The Pandorica is ready!
Bring back the Santaran. Maybe you could bring back the Santaran and the Jadoon in the same episode and have like a Jadoon-Santaran war. Or something. I don't know. Just an idea. That one's for free, whoever's writing the next season of Doctor Who. Whew! We have 3 more things on my list here. Number 1, we have the death of Amy.
No. No.
I really liked that they killed Amy at the end of this episode. I thought that was really cool. And the prison, the idea of them putting the Doctor in this prison, I really liked that as well. I thought that was, sort of cool that, the Doctor, that, all of his enemies come together just to put him in this prison. Now, there's certain, technical things that probably don't work with that, kind of the Cybermen and the Daleks, the Daleks working with these other species doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I think this is one of those things where, it's kind of cool enough that, I'll let it slip, right? Anyway, just, so plus 1 point for the prison, plus 1 point for the death of Amy, and plus 1 point for the great cliffhanger. So, with that being said, I'll put it up right there, the number, overall subtracting my negative points and adding my plus points. But overall, I would say this is a pretty good episode based on the positive points I gave it compared to the negative points. Now, with that being said, let's move on to the next portion of this episode. Next up, how would I rewrite this episode? This is the part of the show that I introduced last time and I had a lot of fun with, so we're doing it again. So this episode is a little more difficult than last time because I actually enjoyed the end product quite a bit, but I'm gonna try and go for it. I think I would keep the beginning very much the same. I would show all of the characters from previous episodes. That would be very cool. I think I would shift sort of the focus of this episode to sort of being about finding the Pandorica. Sort of think Indiana Jones Doctor Who, right? Where the Doctor is looking for the Pandorica and then he realizes that the Pandorica happens to be surrounded and guarded by basically all of his enemies. This would give time for the monsters to do more than they do in this episode. We sort of had this with the Cybermen, but I think it would be fun to have scenes of Jadoon, sort of attacking the Doctor or whatever, or that sort of thing. I would want to focus more on the uneasy alliance of the monsters. I think that would be pretty cool. I apologize if this is a little less interesting than maybe it was last time. But, like I said, I already enjoyed the episode quite a bit. So the changes that I would make would either be just sort of shifting the focus of the episode, or like they aren't necessarily necessary. It's just something that I would personally like to see because of my own personal preferences. So with that being said, that's all. I'm gonna close off that section of how would I rewrite it at that. Let's move on to the moral of this episode. So there's not a lot of moral to this episode, but there is one big takeaway, I think, and that is that stuff is never helpless. There's a big theme in this episode of the characters being like, oh, we're helpless. All of these alien enemies are coming to us and there's nothing we can do about it. And I think it's easy to look at things and be like, oh, there's no good options. I think it just takes a little bit of creative thinking and there will be some good options. So that's sort of my takeaway, is that nothing is ever entirely hopeless. And even the cliffhanger at the end of this episode feels like, oh, there's no hope. The doctor's locked up, Amy's literally dead, and Rory is actually just a piece of plastic. However, of course, the show goes on after this, so we have to realize that there was hope. But it's like the doctor, being like, oh, let's get the Romans to help us. And that's sort of what I want to sort of push as like sort of the moral of this story is, when you feel like you have no hope, just think, what Romans are there that I didn't see, right? And then maybe sometimes the things that you didn't see when you thought was hopeless, those things will actually be better than anything else actually could have been. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. But thank you so much for sitting in on this class. Hopefully next time I'll find a way out of this cardboard box that my brother locked me in, but for now this is where I am. And if you want some homework, I would love to hear what your moral of this episode would be and how you would rewrite it. I would honestly be happy to hear like your guys' personal different versions of this episode if you want to leave those in the comment section. I promise you I will most definitely read them. But with that being said, class dismissed. And I guess I'm just gonna sit here in my box now. I'm in the middle of filming a video, so...
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start.
Yeah, go for it. I'll let Eric know as well, and he'll be done. Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. That was my mom.